Well, good morning. It is Monday and it's time for the Missionary Minute. We have a team here today, so we're headed out to the feeding center in Guadalupe, which means we take a hike. And but I wanted to come to you real quick before the video and just share something that before we leave out with the team and do the video. I'm outside today. I hope the dogs won't disturb us, but what I had on my heart to share with you today for the Missionary Minute is putting feet to your faith. You know, there's two things that there's two things that really and truly come into play. Number one, what do you do in that period of time when you're waiting on the Lord to tell you it's time to step out? You know, you can still put feet to your faith. You can still be doing something that's going to work you toward your call, work you toward your goal. What is it that the Lord's called you to do? You know, while you're waiting, you need to use that as a preparation time. While you're waiting, you need to use that as a time to really get as prepared as possible for that. You know, I was thinking it's kind of like, our soldiers and boot camp. Before they're not going to battle just yet. They're waiting for the right time. Sometimes the Lord has you in a waiting period before you actually step out into full-time ministry or step out into full-time whatever God's called you to do. And you know what? During that waiting time, don't make the mistake. Don't fall into that pitfall of doing nothing until God moves you out. Good morning, Miss Monica. And you need to use that time to be able to prepare yourself. That's what the soldiers do at boot camp, isn't it? You know, they're not ready for battle yet. But that waiting period, that interim period is so that they can prepare themselves. They can get ready for the battle. And God may have you in a waiting season, but it's so that you can prepare yourself. So number one, you need to be prayed up every day. You need to be praying into your call, praying into that thing that you feel like God's called you to do. You don't need to wait until you've stepped out into it before you begin to pray over it. Begin to pray over it now. Begin to pray earnestly over what you feel like God's called you to do. You may not have the whole picture. Just pray over whatever you know. Pray whatever you know. Use that period to pray, number one. But number two, you've got to put feet to your faith. Whether you've stepped out into the call or not. You know, those soldiers, they had to go to boot camp. They had to pack up their things. They had to say goodbye to their families. And they had to get on a bus or a plane or whatever it is and go to Fort whatever to prepare for actually being a soldier. So use this time like boot camp. Get into shape spiritually. Make sure that you've got yourself in shape spiritually, that you're ready to go. Begin to take steps that you need to take, like learning a language. Use that time to begin to take classes and learn a language. There are so many things that you can do. If you'll spend time praying, God's going to show you what it is that He wants you to do while you're preparing. So use the time to prepare. Put feet to your faith. That's before you step out. And after you've stepped out, you still have to put feet to your faith. You know, sometimes we expect God to just drop everything into our lap. We use the we use the phrase, we coin the phrase that we want God to open the doors. And sometimes we don't only want God to open the door, but we want him to shove us through it. We won't even take the step when the doors are open. We make all kinds of excuses, for not going through the door. And we blame it on God. And we say, well, we want God to be the one to do it. And he's waiting on us to take a step. So number one, you have to take steps to prepare. And then number two, once you feel like he's calling you, setting you apart, do it. Take steps to do it. I remember when I can't get comfortable this morning here. I'm holding the deal because I'm outside because we have a team. But once you've stepped out, I remember whenever we went to Mexico. I had taken some classes to speak Spanish, but I had 3 words of Spanish. And I could barely say anything in Spanish. Larry was working a full-time job before we left, so he didn't have time to hardly study even that much. So what did we do when we first got there? Did we just sit and do nothing? Oh, Lord, no. We stepped out. I remember whenever we began to, we had a video of the Jesus movie in Spanish because, like I said, we didn't speak Spanish. And all we had was a home. We didn't have a lot of money. I've told y'all that story before. And we had practically no money, so we're showing the Jesus movie in our vacant living room because we didn't have furniture. We had no furniture. Another story. Showed the video in our living room. We set up some boards. Larry was able to buy some boards and set them on cinder blocks to make benches. And we set it up in our vacant living room. And but what did we do to get the word out? Do you know that we went door to door? I looked up all the words of how to say, we live in such and so a house and we're showing a movie tonight in our home and we would like to invite you to come. And not only did we memorize it, but we typed it up on little pieces of paper and ran off Xerox copies, cut them out, and like little flyers, and we went door to door for hours, and we knocked on doors, and we would look at the paper, and we would say, vivimos en la casa 26 M de Garza, y no queremos invitarle a ver una película esta noche. We live in 26 M de Garza, and we would like to invite you to come see a movie tonight in our home. And we would hand them the piece of paper and smile, and they would say things to us, but we couldn't understand what they were saying. So we would just smile and try to nod and go on. But you know what? We could have sat back and done nothing. We could have sat back and just said, you know what? We don't speak Spanish. What are we going to do? I guess we need to go spend 6 months taking language, which that's fine. But quite frankly, you probably should have taken language before you went. That's your preparation time. That's your boot camp. Another trail. So do what you've got to do before you go. Then do what you've got to do when you get there. We went door to door and we invited people to come to our home to see the movie. We didn't speak Spanish. At the end of the movie, they give an altar call. So we would I memorized a prayer. After the movie was over, we prayed with everybody. And we continued to show this movie. We had a couple of movies, so we showed a couple of movies. And once everyone had accepted Jesus, they had seen all the movies we had brought down, we said, well, what are we going to do now? So Larry began to preach, and he would have to make his message up in English because, like I said, he didn't even have time to study Spanish. He was working a job. That was, me learning Spanish. That was our plan. So he formulated his message all in English. He had to have it to me by Monday, and I translated. He had to write it out verbatim, like a lecture. and I translated every single word with a dictionary, because online didn't work back then, word for word in my paper dictionary. And I translated the entire thing. And then I sat down with one of the ladies who became a very dear friend of mine by watching the movies. And I would read that to her and say, you know, does that make sense? And she would be like, not so much. What are you trying to say? So we spent an entire day or two going over this. And then she would say, oh, okay, so will you say it this way? And so I would correct all of my copy. And then, because our pastor taught us to do things with excellence, Larry practically memorized his part. I practically memorized my part. We had it in front of us, but for the most part it was memorized, because we didn't want to just stand up there and read it. If we were just going to stand up there and read it, we could just pass them out a copy and let them read it for themselves. So Larry memorized his part. I memorized my part. And we stood up there and preached. Well, pretty soon, he didn't have to get it to me quite as early. Then I didn't have to, spend quite as much time trying to get the accurate translation. Then before you know it, we didn't have to write it out at all. It was kind of like charades, though. I mean, I remember one time he was preaching out of Numbers about the spies, and they said, you know, that we're like grasshoppers in their sight. And during our church service, I was like, you know, because we'd already stopped doing the written translation, I said, it's that little green animal. Oh, it's a little animal that jumps, as I told them. And they're like, oh, a rabbit. I said, no, it's not a rabbit. A frog. I said, no, it's green. They said, oh, a frog. I said, no, it's not a frog. It rubs its legs together. And they're like, oh, okay, I got it. It's a cricket. It's a grasshopper. So it was kind of like charades. They weren't very bored. We kept them quite entertained. But you know what? You've got to put feet to your faith. We're talking about putting feet to your faith today. We're talking about doing something lest you do nothing. So I just want to encourage you with that today. Go through boot camp. Do your preparation. Oh, the dogs are barking at somebody walking down the road. Do your boot camp. Do your preparation. And then once you step out, you still got to put feet to your faith. When God opens that door, He's not going to push you through it. He's not going to push you through the door. He's only going to open the door. You have to make the step of faith. All right, guys, the dogs are carrying on, so I'm gonna sign off for today. I love you. Pray for us. We're headed up to Guadalupe. I love you guys. Have a great day. Feet to your faith.